Bienvenidos a otro episodio de Conversaciones de CRM con este servidor Jesús Hoyos de CRM Latinoamérica. Ya saben, estamos en vivo en Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube y eventualmente pues, en todas las plataformas. Y hoy vamos a hablar realmente pues, de las realidades en selección un Customer Data Platform. And I'm going to switch now to English. Welcome, David, to another episode of CRM Conversations. That will be the Spanish, the English translation.
Well, thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
Okay. So Tatiana is back with us. Hi, Tatiana. So she's going to be behind the scenes, monitoring comments and publishing stuff. And then she's going to come back to let us know what's coming up on the next live streams. See you at the end, Tatiana.
Bye, Tatiana.
Okay, so here we are. David, probably the people who are listening for the first time, they don't know who you are. And I think you're a very instrumental person in the industry because you're putting together and trying to have everybody understand what a customer data platform is. And I do remember one of your lectures in the CRM conference, CRM Evolution conference in DC. You started explaining with this, and it was like, what the heck is this? What is a CDP? It's confusing. It's too much. A couple of years now, it's a whole complete industry, and you had the vision to understand what that means, and you put together the institute and so on. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what the CDP Institute is all about.
Sure. So my background, started out as a marketer many years ago in magazine circulation and continuities. Did that for about 9 years. And then I spent most of my career as a technology consultant, helping people to select vendors and software companies. And as part of that, you always, of course, are keeping an eye out on the industry and what's going on. And one of the things we saw back in 2013 was some systems that were application systems doing things like lead scoring or predictive modeling or campaign management that were also building their own database to do that. And that was a new thing at the time, because up until then, systems that did that kind of application would rely on a custom-built data warehouse or customer database that would be separate, and then they would simply be connected to the two together. So to see one system do both was actually a new thing. And it needed a new name because it was a new thing, and came up with Customer Data Platform as the name. So that was 2013. For the next 3 years, I talked about it a lot, and not too many other people talked about it a lot, but the industry was sort of growing underground. And for some reason in 2016, it sort of emerged and became very popular. It's been growing in popularity ever since. So back in 2016, we put together the Institute, which had the mission of helping to explain this to people and really helping people just to do a better job with their customer data, which conveniently also happens to usually involve a customer data platform. So I spent the last 5.5 years just trying to talk to people and educate them and get them to understand what these things are and how you use them and what they're not, because often people think there's something that they're not, and just doing our bit to help make the world a little better place, at least in the customer data management area.
And it's interesting listening to you, because when I started, working on CRM, I was working with a company out from Orlando, Florida. Enterprise Series was the name of the software, using Informix 4GL back then.
Okay,
I know that was the real software back then.
Yeah, so 4GL, it wasn't a third GL. It was already for kids. Anyway.
Yeah, I know. And most of our customers back then used to be companies that would, do, publishers, newspapers, books, magazines. And, we had to put together, one of those customer databases. Back then it was a marketing database.
Yeah.
And also, we have another customer database that was somewhere, but that wasn't good enough to do campaigns. And then we have, different data sources. And for me, that's the evolution that I started working, with marketing databases, and now, customer databases, and we have, master data management platform, and there's a CRM, and people get all that confused. And that's why, I wanted today to discuss exactly about what are those realities of selecting a customer database. And I'm going to throw out three statements, so we can start, having this conversation. A CDP, a customer data platform, should be able to help you to market, sell, and provide better service to customers. Not just marketing. Okay, that's the first statement. The second statement is that create customer profiles. We as customers have different, we could be in different segments, we could be different personas, and that will help you understand that. Okay, and in there you have data quality, the duplication, all that cool stuff that make sure that you have good data so you can make decisions. And they're saying that if you have that foundation of that data store and be able to with those insights, you should be able to act on it. So it should be able to help you with your customer operation, because one source of information, you see one place, and you guys can make decisions to be better, to provide better customer-centric operation. So based on these statements, how do you see the market? How do you see, the selection? How are people still confused? Are people still looking for the technology versus the strategy? Are they doing both? Where do you see the market today when people want to select a CDP?
Well, the market is in a pretty interesting place. It's, Gartner actually called it about right on their hype cycle, and we've sort of passed the peak, and we're kind of going down past that. So the initial inflated expectations have been tampered a bit by now. CRM is actually very similar. It went through a similar pattern. Some of my old friends who are old CRM people, when I describe this, they say, we just went through all that with CRM too. So the first stage was that people get all excited. Oh, CDP is going to do everything. It's going to solve all my problems. And they're kind of over that now. People begin to have an understanding of what it does do and what it doesn't do. It certainly can support all of your customer activities, not just your marketing activities. To your point, I think that is one of the big trends that we've seen in the last 2 or 3 years, really, is that CDPs were originally adopted primarily by marketers. And even today, they're still dominantly used by marketers, but maybe it's 50% of the CDPs are used primarily by marketers, but not 90%, which is where it would have been, say, 4 or 5 years ago. So what happens, it's an interesting dynamic, is that you get the CDP in place, and let's assume that the marketers are at least driving the project. And then the other people on the company say, oh, you got all that data over there. I can use some customer data. Let me take a little slice of that. So once it gets established, or once the idea even gets brooded about in the company, that other departments say, oh, yes, I have the same problem, or I have a problem that this could also solve. So what we see now is we see increasing number of CDP projects that, even if marketing was the initial group to want it, now the rest of the company gets involved, which means it now becomes an enterprise project. So now the corporate IT group, or the corporate data people, or the corporate analytical people will come in, and they will say, okay, well, we'll take this over, and we will run it for the good of all. And marketing, you're going to be one of the constituents, a major one, and we're going to ask you for money. But it's no longer just a marketing project in some companies. In other companies, it's still a marketing project, and that's okay too.
So based on that process, because you mentioned IT, and because of the corporate, governance, security, data, compliance, traditionally, when you look at, from the marketing perspective, the way I put it sometimes, some marketers, is say, hey, listen, for example, you might have HubSpot, and you have it integrated with Salesforce, and maybe you have, I don't know, HotSuite with your social media information also integrated with Salesforce. And out of the sudden, you see hotspot data within Salesforce, the activity that happens. And then you can see probably the social media activity within Salesforce. And let's assume that, probably you're using, some sort of a tool for customer service. And also you can see the Facebook profile, and maybe you have LinkedIn connected, but people start saying, oh, I like this, but it's still, it's not organized. It's a view. You might have access to some of the data, but it's not, it doesn't give you a profile. And they say, well, oh, then I want to have the profile. And that's the moment where we cross over from marketing, trying to make a decision of how to put together that customer data, to having IT. Okay, because then IT say, wait, hold on, because that means that we have to do integrations. We have to have, data quality. We have to validate that we have to check in. We need to bring the data that is coming from the ERP, the back office, and then becomes, like you're saying, an enterprise project. And at least in Latin America, a lot of that data, a lot of that marketing data is owned by the agencies, the marketing agencies. Okay, especially when you have a large enterprise with multiple brands. How you see that process today? Say, oh yeah, we're going to select, but hold on, people. First, we need to figure out the governance internally. We need to organize the enterprise to be sure that we understand what we're asking for. How you see that process today evolving, in the market?
Well, you're right, and I think evolving is the word. It's not resolved in a lot of organizations. A lot of organizations will probably never resolve it. It's just a complicated problem. But where there's a will, there's a way. So if there's enough business users who want this to happen, then the company can move slowly to make it happen. I think that's an important thing for people to realize, is this is not something that just magically overnight has all your customer data from all your sources pulled in. It's like any other, well, I don't know, it's like any other project, but it is like a project that has to be deployed incrementally. So you decide what's the most important thing you're going to do. What data do I need to achieve that? Let me pull that into my CDP. Now here's another thing I want to do. Let me pull in some more data because that requires another source. So I'll pull that in. I'll just slowly begin to build that up. So it's important for people to realize that that's how it should be done. That is how it's done. But the governance guys and the IT guys and all the people who have to worry about that, they're going to be watching it correctly from the start to make sure that everything that gets put in there should get put in there, that it's got good quality on it, that's got properly consented from a privacy perspective, which is a huge reason to build a CDP, because you have to make sure you're compliant with privacy regulations. So there's all these sort of enterprise issues. You have to have good security on it, that even if the CDP had one data source, you would have to do. And as the CDP accrues more data sources, it just becomes more and more important and more difficult to make that happen. But again, that's what we pay these IT guys for, is to be able to do those hard things.
Well, that goes back to the question of Luis here, and in the market, there's a confusion between CDP and CRM. But why I have the CRM is data that is out there, but you need to combine it. Like you said, maybe the CDP, the CRM is the whole source of the CDP, but you need to have multiple data sources to have a good CDP. Again, it's not just marketing, sales, and service, plus ERP as well. Logistic, all that stuff. So how do you see? And I know you say we pay all these IT guys to put that together. But don't we need, when you're about to, before, you put together the team, some sort of a data champion from the business side to say, this is what I need. This is the data that I need. This is where I need to start with, because I think that, that data ownership, understanding the data, I think is extremely important. And a lot of people start asking, I want this data source. I want that data source. I want this. But at the very end, I think a lot of companies, internally, they don't know what they have in terms of data. They don't know what the agency has. They don't know what IT has. Do we need to have some sort of a data owner or some sort of a, chief data officer, I don't know, whatever that role is, title?
Well, lots of companies have chief data officers. I've never quite figured out what they do, but maybe that is what they do. I think that is kind of their job, is to keep a sort of a grand eye on things. And but actually, that's two things, and let me answer them both because they're both really important. The first was Louis' question about CRM versus CDP. Is one a subset of the other? And the answer is no. They're very simply different systems. CRM is built for a very specific purpose, and you know this because you have a background in the industry. It's really to put a customer record on the screen so an agent can deal with it, whether a sales agent or a phone agent. And you build a system a certain way to do that. The CDP is built to manage all the customer data and to deal with it in bulk for things like selecting lists and stuff. So you organize it very differently to do that. So they're really very different systems. The CRM will usually feed data into the CDP because the CRM captures data through actual interactions. The CDP doesn't really generate its own data. A couple of minor exceptions that you might have a consent management interface, but by and large, the CDP is pulling data in that was created in other systems, CRM being a very important one. So they're very, very different systems. The CDP may push data back to CRM sometimes. Usually the CRMs are limited in the data that they can actually accept. So things like web behaviors, most CRMs simply can't deal with web behaviors. So that sits in the CDP, and if you want that to show up on a CRM screen, you literally just open a window and the CDP data pops up within the window without it actually being imported into the CRM. It's usually how that works. And that's okay. So it's important to not confuse the two. They don't compete with each other. They're very complementary to each other, but that takes a little getting used to. So then your second question was about having a business champion or a data owner. And when you get up to the enterprise level, there's not one data owner. I must say that's always, over the years, one of the things that always kind of annoyed me was people say, oh, who owns the customer? It's like, well, no, the customer owns themselves. Thank you very much.
Good point.
But even more so, if the real question, well, who's responsible for the customer data? It depends on the system. Whoever's running CRM is responsible for the data in CRM. Whoever's running ERP is responsible for that. Whoever running the web is responsible for that. There's lots of people in lots of different areas who own, in terms of responsibility, that particular piece of customer data. So the idea of having one data person owner to rule them all, it really doesn't even make any sense, especially at the enterprise level. You should have some sort of a governance process. You should have, God save us, a committee of people who have different points of view, all of whom should legitimately be listened to. Nobody likes committees, but you do actually have to have a group of people, all of whom have different needs, whose needs are reconciled. Again, that's how organizations work.
I mean, that's for me the big reality. I mean, people need to put, you need to have governance, and you need to have people to put, in place and execute over that governance. And a lot of people start, selecting vendors and realizing they want to do CDPs for whatever, purpose that they have, but they forget that you need that governance, you need that team, and that's going to help you, put together your roadmap, So that's extremely important, and I would like to put this in perspective from the CDP versus the CRM, CRM, will provide the information to the CDP, and like you said, you might do some calculations and you might bring a summary of that data, not everything, because you made that comment, so you can make decisions at a given point. And people can do something, be able to make that decision based on that information that you have in front of you that is coming from the CDP, and most of the key things, regarding that governance, based on Marshall is noting here, whatever that role is, the chief data officer, definitely you need to have that, and that's where people start. Well, but you put that, then I have to put on hold on my CDP because you have to put all this government together, and people start, I don't know, breaking, I won't say the breaking, but they forget the real purpose of the CDP, because I think you mentioned something really important. Nobody owns the customer. A lot of people want to put together a CDP because they want to own the customer, and that doesn't happen. I mean, I think there has to be, another reality that, company needs to realize or how to put this together, no?
Yeah, and where we're headed towards here is that the customer experience is something that is spread across multiple departments. The customer has an experience with marketing, it has an experience with sales, it has an experience with operation, with service, with lots of different groups within the company. And again, each of those departments is responsible for that, but you do want to have a consistent experience. And every one of those departments, most of those departments, I suppose there might be an exception, will benefit from having unified data available. Okay, so you talked about taking some summary data and pushing it into the CRM so the CRM can make decisioning. Well, if you push enough summary data into the CRM, it'll have a complete picture of the customer. But often you'll only push some of that data into the CRM. And then there'll be other data that could actually be really important, like what they did on the web 2 minutes ago, which the CRM won't be aware of, which the CDP should be aware of if you've wired things together correctly. So it's more convenient, it's more efficient, and it's really better to have as much of that data and as much of that decisioning be centralized rather than having multiple customer-facing systems in different departments, each trying to give the customer an optimal experience, but working with partial data and working with sets of rules that may or may not actually be consistent.
Yeah, and based on what you're saying, sometimes we threw away as well, the term omni-channel or customer journeys, because for me, if you truly want to do omni-channel, I think a requirement is that you have a CDP, because that way you can be, you can manage any channel, based on any interactions with data that that is going to impact that experience, and the CDP will provide you those insights, so that you can today jump from WhatsApp to email to phone, in the day-to-day operations, and at the same time, when you do customer journeys, traditionally the customer journeys are left to right, where you have a process that you want to guide the customer through that, and that's fine depending of what you're trying to sell. But at the very end, you need to have customer journeys that, based on the interaction that the CDP is listening, you can act upon that. So you have like subsets of mini journeys that you're going to activate, and the CDP is extremely important for that. And, and let me give you one scenario that happens to me over the weekend with a major airline, where I am, I don't know, more than 5 million miles with them, 20 years, and after 2 years, I went to their website and they have no idea who Jesus Hoyos was, even if I've logged in. And I made the phone call, I did the chat, I did all the different channels, and at no given moment they say, "Hey, Jesus, welcome back. First time after 2 years, here's your flight credit. This is the option for you to redeem your flight credit." As simple as that. They have the data, but here comes the other aspect of this, because still they're selling seats. They're not selling experience, and if you're going to put together a CDP, I still believe that you have to have some extremely a strong conviction of, to be customer centric, because you have all this data, and then you're going to push product versus in the interaction. It's going to fail, no?
Yeah, well, again, it's not a switch that you flip and suddenly you're customer centric and everything is wired together. And that would be nice, but nobody has that switch, right? It's not like the easy button you just press and it all gets fixed. So you're going to wire in one channel at a time, and you're going to make incremental changes. And a lot of the systems you have are old systems. The problem with airlines is that they have these huge, super complicated systems. And the core systems are 40 years old by now at the airlines, the ticketing systems. So it's really hard for them to make changes. in the core system. So they have this Band-Aid and that patch and all this other stuff on top. And then they get a social media system in. I saw you actually tweeting and complaining about that on my Twitter feed. And it's like, well, they're sitting over there in Hootsuite or whatever the heck tool they're using. Maybe they can dial into some other system and look up your record if they're really ambitious and do that, but chances are they're not going to bother. It'll take them a while, whatever. So, those guys are not integrated. Eventually they'll get integrated. But let me make the point, because it's actually important, that CDPs build profiles. That's the key takeaway. I actually have the tattoo. You can't see it, but it says CDP builds profiles on the tattoo, because that is the simple explanation of what a CDP does. The things like orchestration is another function, something you do with the profiles. Some CDPs do orchestration, some CDPs don't do orchestration. I'm a very strong believer that orchestration should be centralized, because that's what lets you have that unified experience. But it doesn't have to be. And you can certainly have the CDP and have the CDP simply build shareable profiles and still have all the decisioning happening out in the individual systems. It's not the ideal, but if you have a lot of legacy systems, that can happen. So I don't want the audience, the listeners, what do we call them? Receivers, whatever they are, the people who are hearing this, and who owns them? Do you own these customers? I don't want those people to come away with the notion that the CDP has to do orchestration. And if I can't get everybody in the company to agree that there's going to be one central system controlling all the interactions with all the customers and all the channels, that I can't have a CDP. So I can certainly have a CDP and it can feed data out to those other channels, if that's the best your systems and your organization can handle. And then hopefully you'll unify the decisioning after you have your data unified. But you can't unify the decisioning before you have your data unified. So first you got to build that CDP, build those profiles, unify that data, and then you can work on that next step of unifying the decisioning as well.
So I think you're making a good point here, because company needs to decide, do I want a CDP to do just only the profile, or I want a CDP to do profile and do orchestration at the same time, and then, because that's going to narrow, the selection of vendors that you want to gather, because, everybody now has a CDP. They call it different buzzwords. I have personas, I have customer insights, whatever that is, so what, and I know that today, that's, the CDP Institute, you have white paper, you have vendors of all different, sizes and flavors and niches and geographies and so on. How do you see that trend? Are people actually moving towards that? For example, a couple of weeks ago, Thunderhead, got bought by Medallia. Thunderhead, they do orchestration, and they have some sort of CDP engine, and when you look at tools like MRCs, they also has a CDP, and there is, companies that are 100% CDPs. Others are more deep, data management platform. Others are more of what I call, the master data management. And I think you have a nice graph where you call, if you want a CDP, I think you need to get to the enterprise CDP. Could you elaborate a little bit about that? What are the different types of CDPs out there in the market?
So we do have a typology of CDPs, and I'll take you through it quickly because it's probably more detailed than anybody wants to listen to. But again, all CDPs build profiles, and if you build profiles, and they have to be profiles that take all data sources, that don't throw away any detail, that keep the data for as long as you want to keep it, that take a customer view of the data, that make the data shareable so any other system can access it, that give real-time access to individual profiles like your call center system can call it. So when I say build profiles, I mean it has to really meet all those criteria, because there's lots of systems that have customer data and don't meet all those criteria. But as long as you meet those criteria, I will call you a CDP. Now, some systems, that's all they do. They just build profiles. We call those data CDPs. Some do that, plus they'll have some predictive modeling or analytical attribution type capabilities. We call those analytical CDPs. Some do that plus the campaigning or the decisioning. We guess what we call those campaign CDPs. Some actually deliver the messages. So the scope just keeps getting broader. They do all the other things. Plus, they actually have an email engine or a web personalization engine or whatever. And those, of course, are delivery CDPs. And some actually are an operational system. So an e-commerce system that actually has that core CDP capability inside. Okay, it's a CDP too. We call that an operational CDP. So you can get whatever scope of functionality you want from different vendors. Now, when you get out to the operational ones or even the delivery ones, we say, there's a lot going on in the system. The CDP is just one piece of it. So we refer to that as having a CDP inside of a larger system, because it's not really the focus in most cases. But as long as it ticks all those boxes, we would consider that a CDP. But if it doesn't, we don't. And that's important, because there are a lot of systems that have some customer data, but they don't share it very well usually, or they throw away some details, or they can't deal with this data source or that data source. Back to the CRM example, CRM not being able to take in web history without throwing away details. Those, even though they have customer data, they're not, and even though they might build something that looks like a profile, they are not CDPs. So it is important to realize. And the reason it's important, the reason I spend so much time on this, is because we think people expect a CDP to let them do certain things. We think they expect the CDP to have all the data, to have that complete view, to support the orchestration, even if it doesn't do the orchestration. Again, you can't do orchestration properly without complete data. So if you are calling something a CDP that doesn't meet those criteria, and somebody buys it expecting it's going to do what a CDP does, and then they find out, well, this thing didn't work, it didn't have this capability or that capability, then they get mad at us. They say, oh, CDP's nonsense. Well, no. You didn't understand what a CDP was. You bought something that wasn't a CDP. So it's your fault, not mine. I just don't want to be blamed. Don't call me.
Well, I mean, I think that's extremely important, because I think people need to understand that definition, and I think in the basic form, build customer profiles, and people need to understand that, like you said, a customer profile for a marketing department, it could be different from sales. And even within marketing, when you have different brands, that customer profile could be different, especially when you're doing B2B, B2C, direct to consumer, and so on and so on, marketplaces. I think for me, that the more you get into, the more international, the more enterprise, the more brands you have no way. You have to put together a CDP, because you know what happens today, at least what I see in Latin America. Well, they rely on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, to put together those CDPs. And that's wrong, because that data is not yours yet.
Yeah, this is not a good idea. I would not advise that one.
But because they don't have a CDP, or because it's going to take 6 months, a year to put together a CDP, our Python, access to some API, bingo, you have it, from that point of view. So, a CDP as well is not something that the marketing agency will do for you, or 3 or 4 data scientists, in a corner trying to hack, data to give you something for a campaign. So that has to be very, very specific, from that. And, and going back to orchestration, let me bring back the, the omni-channel, point, because I see a lot of the call center as a service, companies like Twilio, the bot segment, and Genesis, Infobit, and everybody, even Amazon Connect, they give you some sort of capabilities to access a customer profile or build a customer profile, so you can improve that omni-channel. Will orchestration also, will omni-channel also be part of that orchestration? Or two different things from your point of view?
Will omni-channel be part of
a journey orchestration?
One would hope that the journeys are going to be across multiple channels, and the whole point of journey orchestration, of course, is to coordinate across the channel. So yeah, it should be part of the same system. You mentioned Thunderhead, for example. It's a really good example, right? Thunderhead was interesting because even though they kind of sort of qualified as a CDP, they never wanted to be called a CDP. They were actually pretty adamant about it. We respected that, and we said, okay, fine, we won't call you a CDP, but you are one.
It's funny because I had the same conversation with them about that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, they're very clear about it, and I mean, it's a very good product. Really like them. They're very smart guys. But the point is that they were doing omni-channel journey orchestration very much so. And if you're not going to be doing it omni-channel, then what are you orchestrating? I mean, you could run journeys in a single channel, but you're not going to capture all the interactions with the customer. So it's going to be very ineffective, and from the customer's view, very disjointed. I'm over in the loyal customer journey. I keep getting these emails, dear loyal customer this, dear loyal customer that. And in the meantime, I'm on the phone complaining about the fact that you don't know who I am. When I buy my airplane ticket, those are not orchestrated properly. That's the problem you want to solve.
Yeah, and the reason I'm asking because in the industry, depending on the vendor, they sort of treat those two things separate. Depending who you're going after in terms of of technology. So that's something that people need to understand, because one of the key things that probably I see more and more, Twilio, one example, you can buy, for example, Twilio Flex, and it has some sort of within their own environment, some sort of capabilities to do omni-channel, but they have different products. They're API based, messaging, API voice, and so on, that give you the capabilities to connect to a CDP, and bring that and put it, orchestrate, that communication at any given point, versus having just another platform just to do basic orchestration or omni-channel. How much and because you mentioned out of the CDP, going to customer profile all the way to like a campaign CDP, where do you see because the problem that I see for example with some campaign CDPs out there is that you don't get all the good stuff that you get, for example, with the marketing cloud tools out there, being Salesforce or Oracle and Adobe, that have some specific stuff, to do journeys and SMS and push notification, a bunch of other stuff, because I think people need to draw the line there. I would probably, depending on the enterprise, be very specific of the CDP that provide a really good customer profile or customer profiles that will help me market, sell, and service, and do the back office operations. That's probably where I want to start. Would that be your advice, or do you have a different take on that?
Well, really, you talked earlier about trends, so this is getting back to the trend question. We see the market, the CDP market, sort of splitting into two sets of companies. They're the ones who just do the data, and they're focused up at the enterprise level, because an enterprise project is going to be a data-focused project, because every group within the enterprise is going to have its own tools. Okay. And then we see more of the marketing-focused CDPs, and those are the guys who want the campaigning and the predictive modeling and even the message delivery all in one system, because it's all going to be in the marketing system. So they want to have that as tightly integrated as possible and make their lives as easy as possible. But you're not going to get everybody in a big enterprise to pick the same email tool. It just doesn't happen. They all have different ones. Or to pick the same CRM and pick anything else. Any big enterprise, very well, going to have multiple CRMs, multiple email tools, multiple everythings, really. Different departments, different regions will use different ones. So to say that one CDP is suddenly going to replace all those systems doesn't make any sense. But it does make sense to say, you're all going to look at the same data. So at the enterprise level, I can have a data CDP that supports the whole enterprise. But if I want to have all the other capabilities, all those orchestration capabilities, probably going to be a departmental system. Those tend to be smaller organizations that buy those, because they're a little more sensitive to cost, and there's a lot of reasons to it. But just trust me, that's how that works out. So the market kind of splits, and it splits more or less along those lines, if that helps at all.
Yeah, perfect. And now, because we have to, and I think Luis told us, Luis is asking here, would the CDP merge with the metaverse? I guess we have to throw the metaverse out there, you know.
Can we
I
just throw
think
it out, period, and not let it back in? That would work for me. And Web 3.0, he got them all, and good for him. Actually, the metaverse and Web 3.0 are very different. I'm just getting into Web 3.0. Well, sure, the CDP will have data in it. The metaverse will generate tons and tons and tons of data, more than we even are used to so far. You got to put it someplace. So yeah, there'll be a CDP underneath the metaverse, watching everything that you do and guiding
very,
you in ways that I shudder to think.
very scary. Very scary. So, David, we have another 5 minutes, and I want to give a good, review. I mean, what will be the first step, from your point of view, if anybody wants to start, the process of selecting, a CDP, besides, going to your website.
www.cdp.institute.
Yeah, I already put it in the comment. Okay.
CDPinstitute.org. I got my website wrong. CDPinstitute.org. Thank you. I'm glad somebody knows that. So yes, go there. Actually, seriously, there are lots of great tools. We have an RFP generator. We have a use case generator. We have a directory of vendors. We have lots of tons and tons of white paper. We actually have a decent search engine on it now. So it is actually a pretty good place to start.
And your newsletter is excellent, so I encourage everybody to register to the newsletter.
Yes, if they sign up on the site, they'll get the newsletter. And if they're Latin America, we even got our emerging markets newsletter as well. Anybody in Latin America gets it. But in terms of a business process, it always has to start with user requirements. What are you trying to do, and what is stopping you from doing it? Okay, and if what's stopping you from doing it is that you have data that's not connected, systems that could benefit from data that's in some other system, but they can't communicate to each other, that's the core problem that the CDP solves, is sharing of data. So CDP build profiles, the core CDP use case is to share data between systems. So if you have things you want to do that you cannot do because you cannot share data between systems, that's probably why you need a CDP. That would be the reason to get a CDP. So once you would build up a number of use cases that say, okay, these are the things that I would like to do that will be solved by sharing data, and be different systems sharing data for different applications, then you can begin to decide what you want your CDP to do else. Do I need other things? Do I have other gaps I need to close to complete those use cases? So if I want to do personalized web recommendations based on offline sales data from my retail system, okay, well, I got to get the retail data somehow available to the recommendation engine, which was already working with e-commerce data. That's joining data together. That's a CDP thing. But now I also have to somehow get those recommendations exhibited on the website. Okay, so now I have to do something someplace on my website to make that data accessible. That may or may not be a CDP requirement. And it may or may not be a gap. Maybe I can do that today. Maybe I can't. But you have to answer that question. Because the thing about a use case is you have to close all the gaps. It's like the bridge. If you have one gap in the bridge, you fall through, you don't get across to the other side. So you have to close all your gaps. Some of those are CDP gaps. Some of those may or may not be a CDP gap. Now, again, you can buy a CDP to close all your gaps, most likely. But you may or may not wish to do that depending on what else is going on.
You said it. I think we have everything. David, thank you so much. I think Tatiana is having connectivity issue because I don't see her in here. So here, she's back. Okay, there we go. Let's bring her over here. Perfect, Tatiana. So before I do the outro, and so Tatiana, what we have for the next episodes?
Well, Jesus, let me tell you that yesterday we published the podcast, How to Use a Landing Pages in a Customer Engagement Ecosystem. And on Friday will be Paola Becerra, SIP Senior VP of Customer Experience for Latam in Tomando Cafe. So see you on Friday. Let's stay tuned and follow our social media.
Perfect. So David, thank you so much for your time. Much appreciated. Hopefully everybody who's listening now or whenever they see the live stream and the podcast They're working a lot of knowledge. We're going to have a podcast. And again, I encourage anybody who's thinking about putting together a customer profile, even though you don't know what a CDP is, you need to go to the CDP Institute. There's tons of information, tons of white papers and tools. You're going to be able to learn a lot. So, David, thank you so much for your time. So, saying that, I'm going to switch now to Spanish. Don't go, David, okay?
Okay.
Thank you so much. So, ya saben, estamos aquí en Conversaciones de CRM. Pueden seguir en los hashtags de CX2 Advisory. Los viernes con Tomando Café con Jesús Hoyos y los lunes los podcasts de cápsulas de Customer Engagement. Hasta la próxima y cuídense mucho, ¿ok? Gracias por estar ahí presente.